What if the person serving your coffee knew more about your marriage than you did? Theodore Blackwell had built an empire worth $3 billion, but as he sat in the corner booth of Rosie's diner at 2 a.m., staring at his untouched black coffee, he felt more lost than he had as a broke college kid sleeping in his car. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his weathered face, and for the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about quarterly reports or board meetings. The night shift waitress, a woman named Carmen with kind eyes and calloused hands, refilled his cup without being asked. She'd been watching him come here every Tuesday night for 6 weeks now, always alone, always carrying the weight of something too heavy for his expensive suits to hide. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight, she noticed the wedding ring was missing from his finger, and his hands shook slightly as he reached for his phone. "Where are you watching from tonight?" Carmen Rodriguez had worked the graveyard shift at Rosie's diner for 8 years, ever since her divorce left her raising 2 teenagers alone. She'd learned to read people the way others read newspapers: quick, thorough, and usually right about the headlines. The man in booth 7 was different from her usual crowd of truckers and insomniacs. His clothes cost more than her monthly rent, but his eyes held the same hollow look she'd seen in her bathroom mirror during the worst nights of her marriage. Theodore Blackwell, though she didn't know his name yet, had started appearing 6 weeks ago. Always Tuesday nights, always ordering black coffee and apple pie that he barely touched. Always staring at his phone like it held answers to questions he was afraid to ask. Carmen had seen enough broken marriages to recognize the signs. The way he'd start to dial a number then stop, the absent wedding ring tan line, the expensive clothes that looked slept in. Tonight, as she approached his table with a coffee pot, she noticed something that made her stomach tighten with recognition. A small bruise on his wrist, partially hidden by his watch. The kind that came from someone grabbing too hard during an argument. She'd worn makeup to cover similar marks for 3 years before she found the courage to leave. "Rough night?" she asked gently, setting down a fresh piece of pie without being asked. Theodore looked up, surprised by the genuine concern in her voice. Most people in his world spoke to him because they wanted something: money, favors, access. This woman seemed to care simply because he was human. "Something like that," he replied, his voice rough from exhaustion. "I'm Theodore, by the way. I know I've been coming in here for weeks without proper introductions." "Carmen," she said, sliding into the booth across from him, uninvited. Her shift was slow, and something in his expression reminded her too much of her own past to ignore. "You know, in my experience, men who sit alone in diners at 2 a.m. drinking coffee they don't want usually have something eating at them." Theodore managed a weak smile. "Is it that obvious?" "Honey, I've been working this shift long enough to know the difference between can't sleep and won't go home." Carmen's voice was gentle but direct. "Been married long?" The question hit harder than it should have. 12 years next month. Or would have been. He touched where his wedding ring used to be, a habit he couldn't shake. "My wife Victoria is, she's everything I thought I wanted. Beautiful, sophisticated, comes from the right family. Perfect, on paper." Carmen's expression shifted slightly. She'd heard that phrase before, perfect on paper, usually from women trying to convince themselves their husbands weren't as controlling as they seemed. But hearing it from a man, especially one sitting alone in a diner at 2 a.m., sent warning bells through her mind. "Perfect on paper doesn't always mean perfect in reality," she said carefully, watching his reaction. Theodore's laugh was bitter. "You don't know the half of it." Carmen poured herself a cup of coffee and settled deeper into the booth. Years of working nights had taught her when someone needed to talk, and Theodore Blackwell was carrying secrets that were slowly poisoning him from the inside. "Tell me about her," she said simply. Theodore's hands wrapped around his coffee mug like it was an anchor. "Victoria comes from old money. Her family's been in Boston society for generations. When we met, I was just starting to make real money, and she made me feel like I belonged in those circles. Like I was worthy of something better than where I came from." Carmen nodded, recognizing the story. She'd heard variations of it from dozens of customers over the years. People who confused love with status, acceptance with control. She threw the most beautiful parties, knew exactly what to say to my business associates, looked perfect on my arm at every charity gala. Theodore's voice grew quieter. I thought I was the luckiest man alive. A beautiful wife who understood my world, who made our life look like something from a magazine. But, Carmen prompted gently. But somewhere along the way, I stopped recognizing myself. Theodore looked up at her, and Carmen saw something that broke her heart, the same lost expression she'd worn for years. Victoria has very specific ideas about how things should be. How I should dress, who I should associate with, what investments I should make. She says it's because she wants what's best for us, for our image. Carmen's jaw tightened. And when you disagree? Theodore unconsciously rubbed his wrist where the bruise was hidden. Victoria doesn't handle disagreement well. She has ways of making her point clear. The admission hung in the air between them. Carmen had worked with domestic violence support groups as a volunteer. She knew the signs, knew how hard it was for anyone, but especially successful men, to admit they were being abused. 3 weeks ago, I discovered something, Theodore continued, his voice barely above a whisper. I hired a private investigator to look into some financial discrepancies. Money that had been moved around without my knowledge. Carmen leaned forward. What did you find? Victoria has been systematically transferring money from our joint accounts into her personal holdings. Not just small amounts, millions. She's been planning something for months, maybe years. His voice cracked slightly. When I confronted her about it, she didn't even try to deny it. Just told me that half of everything would be hers eventually anyway, so what did it matter? The pieces were falling into place for Carmen now. The late-night diner visits, the missing wedding ring, the haunted look in his eyes. That night, when I said I wanted to separate our finances until we could work things out, Theodore touched his wrist again. She has a temper. Always has. But this time felt different. More calculated. If this moment touched your heart, please give the video a thumbs up. Carmen reached across the table and gently touched his hand. Theodore, I need to tell you something. And I need you to listen carefully, because what I'm about to say might save your life. Carmen's touch was gentle but firm, and Theodore found himself focusing on her weathered hands. Hands that had worked hard, survived hard things, and somehow remained kind despite it all. I've seen this before, Carmen said quietly. Not just in my own marriage, but working here, volunteering at the women's shelter. What you're describing isn't just about money, Theodore. It's about control. And when someone like Victoria starts losing that control. Theodore felt his chest tighten. What are you saying? I'm saying that people who've been manipulating and controlling for years don't just let their victims walk away. Especially not when there's this much money involved. Carmen's voice was steady but urgent. You said the financial moves have been happening for months. That's not impulsive, that's planning. And if she's been planning to take your money, she might be planning other things too. The words hit Theodore like a physical blow. He'd been so focused on the betrayal, the hurt of discovering his perfect marriage was a lie, that he hadn't considered the larger implications. Last week, he said slowly, Victoria suggested we update our life insurance policies. Said it was for estate planning. His face went pale. She's been insisting I should fly to the cabin alone this weekend. Says she's too busy with her charity work to come, but that I need the rest. Carmen felt ice run through her veins. Theodore, where is this cabin? It's remote. About 3 hours north, up in the mountains. No cell service, no neighbors for miles. His voice was getting smaller as the implications sank in. She bought it 2 years ago, said it was for our anniversary. I never questioned why she insisted on putting it only in her name. Carmen pulled out her phone. Do you have any friends you trust? Family members who could verify your whereabouts this weekend? My business partner, James. And my sister lives in Denver. Theodore was struggling to process what Carmen was suggesting. But you really think Victoria would? I think Victoria has been planning your exit from her life for a very long time, and I don't think divorce is what she has in mind. Carmen's voice was gentle but firm. You said she has a temper, that she gets physical. You've got money that she's been moving around without your knowledge. And now she wants you isolated in a remote location with no witnesses. Theodore's hands were shaking now. God, Carmen, I feel so stupid. How did I not see this? Because you loved her. Because you trusted her. Because the idea that someone you share a bed with could plan to hurt you is almost impossible to accept. Carmen's voice carried the weight of experience. I stayed with my ex-husband for 3 years past the first time he hit me because I kept thinking the man I married was still in there somewhere. Have you ever faced something like this? Let us know in the comments. What happened? Theodore asked. I realized that the person I thought I married never existed. He'd been showing me exactly who he was all along. I just kept making excuses, kept hoping he'd change. Carmen squeezed his hand. But you still have choices, Theodore. You still have time to protect yourself. What do I do? Carmen looked around the empty diner, then back at Theodore with the intensity of someone who'd fought this battle before. First, you don't go to that cabin. Not this weekend, not ever alone. Theodore nodded, his businessman's mind finally clicking into the same gear that had built his empire, but now focused on survival instead of profit. Second, Carmen continued, you need evidence. And you need witnesses. She pulled a napkin toward her and started writing. My ex-husband worked in security before he became what he became. He taught me a few things about protecting myself. Like what? Like the fact that if Victoria's been planning this for months, there's probably a trail. Phone records, internet searches, maybe even conversations with people who could help her. Carmen wrote down a name and a number. This is Detective Maria Santos. She works domestic violence cases, and she's good at looking for patterns that regular cops might miss. Theodore stared at the napkin. You really think I should go to the police? I think you should document everything while you still can. The bruises, the financial transfers, the isolated cabin suggestion, all of it. Carmen's voice was steady. Because if Victoria is planning what I think she's planning, you reporting it now could be the thing that saves your life. Theodore's phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Hope you're getting some rest, darling. Don't forget to confirm your flight for Friday. Can't wait for you to have some peace and quiet at the cabin. Carmen read the message over his shoulder and felt her blood chill. Theodore, show me your flight confirmation. With growing dread, Theodore pulled up his email. The ticket was booked, return flight open-ended. But what made Carmen's heart race was the small detail at the bottom. Victoria had purchased additional life insurance on Theodore just 5 days ago. We need to call Detective Santos right now, Carmen said. But what if I'm wrong? What if I'm just being paranoid because our marriage is falling apart? Carmen turned his phone toward him. Look at this from the outside, like you're reviewing a business deal. Your partner has been secretly moving large amounts of money. She's arranged for you to be alone in a remote location. She's increased your life insurance. She becomes violent when questioned. Would you enter into a business partnership with someone showing these red flags? The clarity hit Theodore like lightning. I'd run as far and fast as possible. Then treat your life like it's worth at least as much as a business deal. Theodore dialed Detective Santos's number. As the phone rang, Carmen stood up to give him privacy, but he caught her hand. Carmen, why are you helping me? You don't even know me. Carmen's smile was sad but warm. Because 8 years ago, I was sitting in a different diner at 3 a.m., too scared to go home and too ashamed to ask for help. A waitress named Betty sat down with me and probably saved my life just by listening. Sometimes we help because we can, and sometimes we help because we remember when we needed someone to help us. If you've been enjoying this story, subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming tales. Detective Santos answered on the third ring, and Theodore began the most important conversation of his life. 3 months later, Theodore walked into Rosie's diner carrying 2 cups of real coffee and wearing a genuine smile for the first time in years. Carmen was wiping down tables after the dinner rush, her movements efficient and familiar. "Fancy seeing you here," she said with a grin. "Though I have to say, you look a lot better than the last time I saw you." Theodore handed her one of the coffee cups, imported from a small farm in Colombia, the kind of luxury he'd once taken for granted but now appreciated as a simple pleasure. "Detective Santos wanted me to give you this," he said, pulling out a certificate. "It's a commendation for your assistance in the case. Apparently, your instincts probably saved my life." Carmen's cheeks flushed as she read the certificate. Victoria had indeed been planning Theodore's death, with help from her brother, who worked in insurance fraud. The cabin had been modified with faulty gas lines that would have caused a tragic accident during Theodore's weekend retreat. The scheme would have netted Victoria nearly $50 million and a perfect alibi. "I still can't believe I was so blind," Theodore said, settling into their old booth. "You weren't blind, you were in love with who you thought she was. That's not the same thing." Carmen sat across from him. "Besides, you figured it out in time. That's what matters. Because of you." Theodore's voice was quiet but firm. "You could have just served me coffee and minded your own business. Instead, you probably saved my life." Carmen shrugged, uncomfortable with the praise. "You would have figured it out, eventually. Maybe. Or maybe I'd be dead in a cabin somewhere while Victoria played the grieving widow." Theodore reached into his jacket. "Which is why I wanted to give you this." He handed her an envelope. Inside was a check that made Carmen's eyes widen. "Theodore, I can't accept this. It's not charity. It's payment for the best consulting work I've ever received." His smile was warm. "Also, I heard through Detective Santos that you're thinking about going back to school for social work." Carmen nodded. "The Domestic Violence Center offered me a position if I can get my degree finished. Consider your tuition covered. And Carmen, the center is getting a substantial donation, too. Anonymous, of course." Tears gathered in Carmen's eyes. "Why are you doing all this?" "Because 8 years ago, you helped a woman in a diner who needed someone to listen. She went on to help dozens of other women through the shelter. And 3 months ago, those same instincts and that same kindness saved a man who was too proud to save himself." Theodore reached across the table and squeezed her hand gently. "Kindness multiplies, Carmen. You taught me that." 6 months later, Carmen graduated with her social work degree. At her graduation party, she kept a photo on her desk from Theodore's wedding day, not to Victoria, but to a wonderful woman named Patricia who owned a small bookstore and made him laugh every day. In the photo, Theodore was holding a sign that read, "Thank you, Carmen," and grinning like a man who'd found his way home. If you enjoyed this story, please remember to like, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe for more heartwarming tales that remind us how powerful it can be when strangers choose to care for one another.